What would you do if the person who assaulted you ended up walking free while you became the villain of your own family? I never thought I'd be the one sitting in a courtroom watching my own brother get handcuffed after everything that happened over a pair of earrings. Not just any earrings. These belonged to my great-grandmother. They'd survived 2 generations, packed away with care, meant to be passed down like a quiet piece of history. And then they vanished from my room. I didn't jump to conclusions right away. I checked everywhere, retraced my steps. But something told me to pull up the footage from the small camera I kept in my bedroom, mostly for peace of mind after a break-in scare a year earlier. What I saw stopped me cold. My brother's wife, let's call her the bride of the century in her own mind, slipping into my room, rifling through my drawers, and walking out with the one thing that meant more to me than almost anything I owned. I sat on that footage for a few days, trying to figure out how to even bring it up without blowing apart a family dinner. But the opportunity came on its own. My parents had invited my brother and his wife over for a regular Sunday meal, and somewhere between the appetizers and the main course, I decided enough was enough. I looked her dead in the eye and asked her straight up, "Where are my great-grandmother's earrings?" She hesitated, just for a second, but it was long enough. I pulled out my phone, hit play, and let the video speak for itself. The table went silent, except for the sound of her own footsteps on the recording, sneaking through my things like she owned them. My brother was the first one to open his mouth, and not to defend me. He said she did it for a good cause. A good cause. I asked what that meant, and she calmly explained she'd pawned them to help fund their wedding reception. Like that made it okay. Like stealing from family was just a clever budgeting hack, I lost it. I called her exactly what she was, a thief, and turned to my parents, who were sitting there frozen, and told them to call the police because I was pressing charges. That's when she stood up, walked over, and slapped me across the face. Then she grabbed my hair. Then she picked up a glass off the table and smashed it against my head. Blood was running down my face while my mother, finally moving, dialed 911 from the living room. The police showed up fast. When they saw the state of me, they wanted answers. I started explaining, but she kept trying to talk over me, trying to control the story before the officers could hear the truth. That only made them more suspicious. They asked to see the footage. Once they watched it, there wasn't much left to debate. She was arrested right there in front of everyone. For a moment, I actually felt like justice might work the way it's supposed to. To understand why she did what she did, you have to understand who she really was. She lived for spectacle. Every birthday, every anniversary, every gathering had to be bigger and shinier than the last, especially if she was the one hosting it. She modeled her whole personality after glamour she couldn't actually afford. The kind of person who'd rather drown in debt than admit she couldn't keep up with an image. The wedding was supposed to be her masterpiece. She wanted the most jaw-dropping venue, the priciest florals, catering that would make people talk for years. Never mind that she and my brother were already stretched thin financially. She maxed out cards, took out loans, did whatever it took to chase that fantasy. And my brother let her, because he'd always had a pattern of choosing partners who cared more about appearances than substance. He saw the signs early. Everyone did, but he convinced himself her obsession with status wasn't really a flaw, just a quirk he could live with. He was scared of being alone, scared he'd never find someone he considered better, so he ignored every red flag and walked down the aisle anyway. So when she got arrested for stealing and selling my heirloom earrings, my brother's reaction wasn't shock or disappointment. It was damage control. He bailed her out that same night without blinking. Her betrayal of our family's trust didn't matter to him. His loyalty to her was unshakable, and he needed to believe she'd done nothing wrong, because admitting otherwise meant admitting he married someone capable of this. Later that night, he showed up at my door, furious with me. He said I was overreacting, that the earrings weren't even worth that much, that she was just desperate for wedding money and deserved a share of the family's things since she was family now. I told him this was never about the money. It was about trust, about heritage, about the fact that she attacked me on top of stealing from me, and that pressing charges for theft alone was me holding back. He didn't want to hear any of it. Instead, he went to work reshaping the story for everyone else. He told relatives I was dramatic, that I'd always been jealous of her, that I was manufacturing conflict out of nothing. He even claimed to some of our extended family that I had gifted her the earrings as a wedding present. As the baby of the family, he'd always had an easy time charming our parents, and it didn't take long before they started second-guessing me too. A few days later, my mom called. I almost didn't answer because I already knew what was coming. There was that awkward small talk before she worked up to the real reason for the call. She told me she'd spoken to David, that she'd heard the truth, and that the whole situation was disappointing for everyone. I stayed quiet and let her talk, already sensing she'd sided with him, at least partially. Then she said it. She wanted me to apologize. She said it might help heal the family. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Apologize for getting slapped, for having glass smashed over my head, after confronting someone for stealing a family heirloom. It became painfully obvious my mother wasn't concerned with what actually happened. She was concerned with how it looked. with keeping the peace instead of standing on the side of what was right. I hung up. Within days, the family had split. Half stood behind me, half sided with my brother's version of events. It was gutting to watch people I'd known my whole life choose comfort over truth, but I wasn't going to be gaslit into believing I was the problem. It was theft. It was assault, and I wasn't backing down. My brother didn't stop at rumors. Once I officially pressed charges, he escalated, telling anyone who'd listen that I only cared about the payout, that I was bitter and jealous because I hadn't found my person yet, so I couldn't stand to see him happy. He painted me as some vindictive, lonely sister trying to sabotage his marriage, and it worked on more people than I expected. Relatives who'd initially supported me started asking if maybe I was taking things too far. I knew I couldn't fight this alone, so I hired a lawyer. I assumed the case would be simple. I had video evidence and proof the earrings had been sold, but I underestimated how far my brother was willing to go to protect his wife's image, and maybe his own. He started bribing relatives, paying them to claim they'd heard me say I didn't care about the earrings, that I'd casually handed them over as a wedding gift. Complete fabrications, but delivered with enough confidence that my lawyer flagged something was off almost immediately. Then came the real gut punch. Fabricated text messages, allegedly between me and her, showing me offering the earrings, even saying she could keep them. Seeing those screenshots for the first time made my stomach drop. They looked disturbingly real. My lawyer eventually tracked down one of the relatives who'd agreed to testify and got them to admit, off the record, that my brother had paid them to lie. This wasn't just about winning a legal case for him anymore. It was about erasing any version of events where his wife was capable of wrongdoing, even if it meant destroying my credibility to do it. The day of the trial, the air in that courtroom felt heavy enough to touch. My lawyer laid out our case first. The security footage of her sneaking into my room, the paperwork proving the earrings had been sold, everything. Then came the witnesses my brother had lined up, and that's when his plan started falling apart in real time. The first witness, a distant cousin, cracked under cross-examination and admitted my brother had paid him to lie. Next was a family friend who confessed the same thing. Each admission chipped away at the story my brother had built, and you could feel the room shift with every word. Then my lawyer presented the fabricated text messages, and an expert testified they'd been digitally altered. That was the final nail. The judge was visibly disturbed by the scale of the deception and ordered my brother's arrest on the spot for fabricating evidence and witness tampering. He was walked out in handcuffs while the rest of the family sat in stunned silence. She was convicted of theft. The footage and sales records left no room for doubt. The judge awarded me the full value of the earrings, along with something I hadn't even known existed, a portion of an inheritance my parents and brother had quietly kept from me. My grandmother had apparently left a trust fund in my name, one my brother had been managing, which really meant spending on himself while hoping I'd never find out. That was the moment my parents had to face the truth that they'd spent months defending the wrong people. Walking out of that courtroom, I saw my mother's face, and it wrecked me. She'd spent this entire ordeal trying to protect appearances, and now she was staring down the reality that her son was heading to prison, this time with no one left to blame but him. Once everything settled and the trust was finally transferred to me, it felt strange at first, almost tainted by everything it took to get there, but I needed distance, so I used part of it to book a trip to the Cayman Islands, as far from the wreckage as I could physically get. The moment I landed, I felt like I could breathe again. No trial prep, no family group chats, no walking on eggshells. Just ocean, sunlight, and silence. I swam, I read, I let myself exist without defending my own character for the first time in months. These days, my brother is serving his sentence. Her name is tied to a theft conviction that follows her everywhere now, and my relationship with the rest of my family is still complicated. I've cut contact with my brother completely. My parents are trying to rebuild things, but forgiveness isn't something that comes easily after watching the people who were supposed to protect you choose someone else's comfort over your safety.